So welcome to the Big Book Compendium. Um, this subject today or tonight, whatever, I'm in the morning, you guys are in the evening, but is doctor's opinion, and I love talking about doctor's opinion. For one thing, it begins our journey into step one. And, I want to begin by talking about William Duncan Silkworth, who wrote Doctor's Opinion, and whose theory of physical reaction to alcohol changed the view that we perceive, or the world perceived alcoholics. I'm going to put up a slide really quick, just because some people have asked me, oh, what does this guy look like? Some people have seen pictures of him and stuff, and that's Silkworth right there, average looking guy. And I'm going to take it down. So he's an average looking dude, not gray hairstyle, But Silkworth was a specialist in neurology, and which crossed into psychiatry. So he kind of fused the two together. But he got his feet wet at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. Remember, Bellevue Hospital is a mental institution, but it was there he discovered a passion for working with drunks. And during this time working in a mental hospital, he discovered that alcoholism was an illness, that alcoholics had insufficient quantity of enzymes in the liver and pancreas, resulting in the body being unable to break down alcohol, causing a physical reaction. And that physical reaction is called the phenomenon, he named the phenomena craving, or physical allergy, same thing. That's the body's abnormal reaction after the first drink, which leads us to crave for more. That's that's the physical reaction. This physical reaction is coupled with a mental obsession. And that's the reoccurring, persistent idea of drinking that doesn't respond to reason. It doesn't have choice. It's going to keep bringing you back to it over and over and over again, even though it's killing you, even though it's hurting you, even though it's taking stuff away out of your life. All the reasons why to stop. Basically, we have a mind that condemns us to drink against our will, and a body that condemns us to death. And that's what he came up with. And Silkworth was not the first person to call alcoholism an illness. Benjamin Rush in 1785, we mentioned early in this study, he was a pioneer in American mental health, and he was known as the father of American psychiatry. He was a signer of our Declaration of Independence and the first Surgeon General. He was right under Washington. He declared alcoholism as an illness with a physical factor, but that's how far it went. He couldn't explain what it was. There was nothing about it he could explain, and most doctors did not accept his theory. This is Rush's theory, that alcoholics, they were all weak and sinful. Even doctors said weak and sinful. And Silkworth, explained what it was, where these other guys couldn't. And that was the thing. And there was one doctor that said that he doubted Silkworth until he talked to him. He had never met anyone that was so thorough on it. You could change anyone's mind on alcoholism. And the Big Book uses the word asylum a lot, also known as a sane asylum, mental institutions, mental hospitals. Why did why did alcoholics, not AA, but why did alcoholics wind up in mental institutions? Here's what happened. So in around 1864, because of concerns over the effects of alcohol and drugs had on society, this guy named Dr. Samuel Woodward, who was not a great person, called for creation of what we call inebriate asylums for drug addicts and alcoholics. So drug addicts and alcoholics at the time period were looked at as corrupts to society, thieves, gamblers, rapists, prostitutes, dangerous predators, dangerous to society, right? And rather than let these dangerous, people roam the streets, since they believed alcohol was a problem of the mind, let's put them in these inebriate asylums. And the belief was that in order to cure this disease, or this illness, we'll say, it was necessary to detain the alcoholic. So these inebriate asylums were modeled after insane asylums, but there's a difference. Insane asylum had moral, and I mean, not great places, insane asylums, but they had moral and ethical rules according to the type of patient they had. If a person was diagnosed with this, okay, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Alcoholic patients that were committed to such, regular insane asylums, you couldn't do shock therapy on them. You couldn't dope them up because they didn't look at them as the same light. But this guy Woodward said, okay, well, let's create a place just for them that's like an insane asylum where none of those rules, will comply. So patients in these inebriate asylums were doped up on high doses of tranquilizers, sedatives, and whatever else they could put in you. And they were, given shock therapy. They were giving, they lobotomized people, believe it or not. That's the scrambling of the brain. And, they did interventions involved yelling at patients, physical and mental abuse. Give them that reason to stop drinking and start living a new way. Scare them straight. That stuff works really good. All those methods only caused more mental damage. And by 1920, the U.S. decided inebriate asylums, they declared them as inhuman and were closed and converted. A lot of them were converted into insane asylums, meaning the drunks were now in full-blown mental institutions. Now, they weren't as bad as the inebriate, but to keep these alcoholics and addicts in these places, they're all classified as mentally ill and rarely are given the opportunity to leave. Many patients, sadly, would just disappear into the system, the mental institutional system. And early A members, some had been to both the inebriate asylums, and the ones who've been to the inebriate asylums, they call them evil places. And they pretty much said the same asylums the same thing, but the inebriate asylums were just known as dark, evil places. So in the US in the 20s, the experiment of prohibition, that was where it made alcoholism or drinking alcohol illegal, was failing miserably. I mean, alcoholism was at an all-time high. And one reason is, when you make something illegal, there's intrigue behind it, but the alcohol was not 80 proof vodka or rum or brandy. It was 150 proof or more. And it was very potent and very addictive. So this with Silkworth in the 20s, he opened a private practice, and he invested his savings in stock. And so, like we'll mention in Bill's story about the thriving of the 20s and how there was a time to invest, and the stocks were this new thing, and they're going to take people. I mean, they had never been as high as they were, all this stuff. And so he invested all his stock in a new private hospital that he was promised a high-ranking position once it was opened. And unfortunately, he lost that stock and his own practice when the stock market completely collapsed in 29. So Silkworth is desperate, doesn't know what to do, and he gets recommended to go talk to this guy named Charles B. Towns. And he's broke. And so he went to go work for Towns, and he offered him, Towns let him be the medical director of the hospital. He knew he was getting someone special in Silkworth, and that hospital specialized in treatment, as we know, of alcohol and drug addiction. And he accepted the position of $40 a week, and that was as room and board as well. Silkworth's plan was to re-enter his private practice when he could save up enough money, but it just never happened. So about Towns Hospital. Was founded in 1901, of course, by Charles B. Towns. I'll put up another slide right here just so you can see some interesting stuff. There's Silkworth again. So this is what Towns Hospital looked like. Still stands to this day, but I believe now it's an apartment complex or something. And they would, but a lot of people in New York knew this ad right here that would come out as like a flyer, and it just it would tell you about how long it's been in existence and so forth. But that's pretty much what it looked like at Charles B. Towns Hospital in New York. And its mission, his mission was a place to treat alcohol and drug addiction. And he had all these different techniques. One of them, the belladonna treatment, which was a mixture of, I think it's called hennebane, different berries, different other dried plants, basically to help to clear the patient out, help them. Well, I don't know if it helped you with diarrhea, it probably gave you diarrhea, and intestinal cramps and headaches and stuff. It made the detox go through quicker, right? Some people claim it may have lasted longer, so they give you a longer stay and more money, but no one knows that for sure. But it was given, you know, he was given you for 50 hours straight until the patients, became flush and the eyes weren't dilating more, and on top of that, they had physical exercise and physical therapy, which is happening at the same time you're detoxing. They didn't wait till you're done. But Towns Hospital was a drying out place for the wealthy. So there was an agenda behind it. So American millionaires, European royalty, oil sheiks detox there. There was one man that described it as, who was an American millionaire, says that he met more royalty and more of the biggest people in the world at Towns Hospital than anywhere else. And the rooms were suites, fancy places, and with your own bathroom and telephone, and they had these high-end looking bathrobes and slippers they give you to wear. And the cost of admission was between $200 and $350 for a 4 to 5 day stay. And their advertising pitch was interesting. We have the cure for alcoholism. You see that guy, there's a guy on TV, I don't know if it's on American television, we see it a lot, but the guy comes on and he goes, I have the cure for alcoholism. I'm like, okay. And but this Towns Hospital, that was their pitch. We have the cure for alcoholism. He claimed a 90% recovery rate, but was debunked when he hired Silkworth. I mentioned, earlier, but by this time, Silkworth had worked with 40,000 alcoholics and had a 2% recovery rate. And even now, those 2% were real alcoholics that had the allergy or obsession that he, that was his theory, was the allergy obsession. So when Towns claimed he had 90% recovery rate, Silkworth pretty much just laughed it off, because this guy had a 90% failure rate. He's like, no, it's impossible, dude. He goes, and Silkworth said years later, he never even fathomed that there could be something above 10%. He had hoped maybe to get 10% recovery rate one day. There was no way Towns, he just knew no way Towns could have that recovery rate. So Towns also firmly believed in psychological and medical model, but did not believe alcoholism was an illness. So Silkworth debunked that as well by explaining that certain individuals who drank had the allergic reaction to alcohol, making it impossible to tolerate alcohol. Towns accepted that fact because that's the type of way Silkworth was. He was very good at explaining it. Bill says he wasn't as much a salesman as he was a genius. He could just explain it to you and you knew, in his kind and general approach. But Towns accepted, this fact and made it part of his treatment program, meaning he let Silkworth bring the theory to the patient like he did Bill. They would explain it to you. Basically, Silkworth made this hospital legit, and Silkworth's allergy obsession concept would change alcoholism forever. And when he explained it to Bill, those words, would spearhead AA and become the foundation of AA's first step. Silkworth watched Alcoholics Anonymous go, he watched alcoholism go from a 98% failure rate to 75 to 93% recovery rate. Now just think about this guy. He's worked with 40,000 alcoholics for 38 years at this time. 38 years, about 36 years, 30 years by the time he wrote the big book. And could you imagine just being the witness of that? Imagine you're Silkworth. Just let that sink in. all of a sudden you're like, your only hope was maybe a 10% recovery rate if they could find something. And all of a sudden it's almost opposite of what he had. He also wrote, and we'll read out of it, probably not this week, but next week, is a medical journal called, he had several of them he wrote. You can find them on silkworth.net, but one of them is called Manifestation of an Allergy, written in 37. And that began to get doctors to say, what is he talking about? This is interesting. And of course, doctors' opinion helped that too. But his radical concept that the body was sick, not just of the mind, helped get alcoholics out of mental institutions. It started getting down, these guys don't belong here. They're sick of the body too. And then AA's movement pretty much rescued all these guys from those places because they don't want to put people in there. Let's send them to AA. Think about that, you know. Also about Silkworth, in 1945, he convinced the management of Manhattan's Knickerbocker Hospital to set up a small ward for the treatment of alcoholism. Why is this important? Because they were the first general hospital to do so. Hospitals at that time would not admit alcoholics, so doctors would admit them under fabricated diagnoses. Oh, he's got stomach ailment, he has this, he has that. But he served 6 years at Knickerbocker Hospital and the director of alcohol treatment, attending to an estimated 7, maybe another 17,000 alcoholics after that, is the estimate. No one knows for sure. Quite a bit more, maybe 15,000, There's an A member named Teddy R. who was a nurse, and he was also, he ran the alcoholic ward with him, and he continued it after Silkworth had passed. So Silkworth made sure the cost of Knickerbocker Hospital was cheaper than towns, so that people that had no financial resources could be detoxed. And he worked at Knickerbocker Hospital until his death in 1951. And Bill loved Silkworth. He said, that thank heaven we started AA before Silkworth passed. And I'm going to read what Bill wrote. I think it was some years after Silkworth had passed, but I believe this was either the Grapevine, or I don't know what it's from, but it's pretty good reading. I'm going to go ahead and read it. It'll be a few minutes to read, but it's good. It says, he was utterly and completely indifferent to money, to position, to personal gain, or prestige of any kind. He never sought distinction. His work was his reward. His faith in us was firmer than our faith in ourselves. Without his help, we would have never got going or kept going. His contribution was indispensable. He showed us doctoring is mainly a spiritual vocation, and that the vast majority of physicians really joined the profession to serve their fellow human beings. The man I'm speaking of is AA's first friend, the little doctor who loved drunks, William Duncan Silkworth, a man who is very much a founder of AA as I am. From him, we learned the nature of the nature of our illness. He supplied us with the tools to puncture the toughest alcoholic ego, thus shattering the phases that described our illness, the obsession of the mind that compels the alcoholic to drink, and the allergy of the body that condemns the alcoholic to go mad or die. Without them being there for us, AA would never have worked. Why he loved drunks is a secret only to God and the doctor. He brought you somehow to make your own judgments of yourself, the only kind judgments that count with an alcoholic. How did he do it? It's a gift, he used to say, with his eyes twinkling. He learned very early that the unexpected was to be expected in alcoholism. And for a man who knew as many of the answers as he did, he came to each new case with a wonderfully open mind. When nobody else claimed a drunk, Dr. Silkworth could. he found, rather to his amazement, that even the toughest, the most hardened drunks would talk to him freely, and that many of them, more amazingly, wept. Just coming into his presence was like coming into a light. He had not only had vision, he gave vision. Perhaps no physician will ever give as much devoted attention to so many alcoholics as Silkworth did. He never got tired of drunks and their problems. It is estimated in his lifetime he saw amazing 50,000 alcoholics. He treated 40,000 long before AA existed, when the chance of recovery was very slim. But he was always had faith that one day a way out would be found. In his last 15 years of his life, in close cooperation with AA, estimated he worked with nearly 10,000 more alcoholics. None of those he treated ever forgot their experience, and many of those 10,000 are sober today. A frail man, he never complained of fatigue. In the last years, he ignored a heart condition. He died on the job, right there among us drunks with his boots on. I believe that AA is his reward, and all those who prodded along, treating drunks medically, defending them, loving them, and not getting anywhere much with them. And then God said, "All right, little man, I'm going to give you your drunks a lift." And then the lightning struck. There was Silkworth, right there where he belonged, in the midst of it all. It has been 23 years after Silkworth treated me, this is Bill, for the last time. I thank God for doctors, one of the finest groups of friends AA's ever had. No doctor ever well trained scientifically could get far until he's able to make sick people feel like he understands them as human beings. Silkworth understood us. So without Silkworth, AA may have never existed, obviously, and his contributions were enormous. And one of them, some of them were putting his medical reputation on the line. And some of those examples are huge. I mean, I look at the first contribution as the allergy obsession. Drunks, was accepted. Drinking was accepted. Drunks were not accepted. Alcoholism was considered, weakness and sin. The idea of alcoholism as an illness was absurd. The allergy obsession, concept was a radical concept. And again, putting his medical reputation on the line. Another contribution he gave us was the doctor's opinion. And as a salesman, Bill understood the value of a third-party testimonial, and he knew that a group of drunks publishing a book was, laughable. Again, he's risking his medical reputation, and the doctor's opinion, giving AA his endorsement of the book and approval at a time where there was only not even 100 dried up. And another contribution was letting Bill sponsor. Again, this is risking his medical reputation big time, because it would have got out that, oh yeah, this guy had a spiritual experience in his hospital, and now he's letting the guy give a spiritual treatment for alcoholism. He didn't care. He let Bill, go down there. And, without Silkworth letting Bill do that, who knows what would happen. Another contribution was when he told Bill, "You're not insane." When that, if you recall, after Bill had a spiritual experience, he asked Silkworth, "Am I sane?" And he told him, "You're fine. Whatever you got, you better hold on. It's better than you were an hour ago." I mean, what would have happened if you would have given him a pill? Calm down, take this pill. You just sleep this off for a while. Without those words, "You are not insane," A may never existed. And another contribution is, after 6 months of failing to keep members sober, Bill went to Silkworth, and that's why he's failing with members. And Silkworth told him, "Don't give him the God stuff, give him the medical stuff first." Step one was born, powerless over alcohol. Next person he talked to, Dr. Bob. Another contribution, it was when we needed money for the A Big Book. He went to doctors and didn't care if he had to tell them what AA was, spiritual. And he got over 4,000 or over 5,000 donations putting reputation on life. Without the, without that money, we'd never have gotten this book written. Since Silkworth's doc's opinion is the meat and potatoes of step one. So I'm going to put up step one up here, and we're going to look at it. So you've heard the old saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and it begins with step one. It's the most important step. And why is it the most important? Because if you're not ready or willing, same thing, we're not, willing to do step one, nothing more can happen. There's an old saying that the end justifies the means. And sometimes it takes a dark life is necessary to achieve it, or something, like an allergy, to get us on the road towards freedom. It's not always pretty. And once you understand step one, it propels you into the next step, into the next step. I mean, it's always there. So let's look at it. It says, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, our lives have become unmanageable. So admit means to declare something as true or real. Admit also means, to let in, allowed to enter or grant entry. Like in the theater tickets in the early days, it would say admit one. So in essence, admitting you are powerless is your ticket to a new way of life. So again, the end justifies the means. Powerlessness means completely without power. The lights are off, no human power. We have to have, we do not have the ability to solve our problems using human resources, a hopeless condition of mind and body. We've hammered that pretty well today, the allergy obsession. And that is impossible to solve on our own power. And many in recovery do not know why they're powerless. Oh, they're going to name all these reasons and people, places, and things. And it's because of the allergy obsession. And step one is very interesting because it does not require that we admit we're alcoholic. Like some people will say, oh, powerless, powerless to alcohol, whatever. It says, but rather that we are powerless over alcohol. Being powerless over alcohol means we have lost the freedom of choice. Powerless over alcohol when drinking, and that's before the drink, in between the drink, after the drink, whatever you want to put it. But probably the most important thing, and we'll talk about this more even when we get the first part of Bill's story, because that explains the unmanageability. But it's the dash. Again, very misunderstood in Alcoholics Anonymous is it does not say we're powerless over alcohol, therefore our lives unmanageable, or end our lives unmanageable. It's called an M dash, EM dash, and it's an old school punctuation mark that is used instead of like a exclamation point. It's to give and indicate a strong emphasis on a powerful point, and that's what it is. Powerless over alcohol, your lives unmanageable. That's the exclamation aspect of it. And unmanageability is simple. It's the inability to manage and control your life without great difficulty. The inability to do so. Many think in recovery, unmanageability is being intoxicated. I was told that in rehab. Well, you're unmanageable only when you're drunk. And a counselor told me that one time. No. You give anyone, I love my mom to death. She's a saint in my eyes. But give her an 8-ball and a drink, she'll be unmanageable real quick. It's just the way life is. But it's like anyone when they're loaded, whose life is not unmanageable and intoxicated. Unmanageability comes from different directions. Consequences, DUIs, jail, losing family and friends, breakups, failed relationships, of all kinds, car accidents, losing our jobs, going to jail, rehab, and more and more and more. And then there's deeper. There's the insanity that we cannot stop drinking, the insanity of the first drink, the insanity of the obsession. And then there's a type, Bill Wilson had mentioned the unmanageability we have when we're bone dry. And that is being restless, irritable, and discontent. Restless, irritable, and discontent, you hear mentioned a few times in this book. And it's the mindset, complete mindset of having high anxiety, being easily um, high anxiety, being easily irritated or easily pissed off and never satisfied. High anxiety, being easily pissed off and never satisfied, all wrapped together. And that's in between your spree. That's when you're dry, not doing the steps. You know, it's the dry, sobriety, so sobriety, people call it. It's it's how we think, behave, and and believe and deal with life, and we don't want that. And the big book calls this type of unmanageability many things: spiritual malady, spiritual sickness, insanity. I like how some people outside the book will call it simply untreated alcoholism. And if I continue to experience, you know, any type of unmanageability, my mind will seek out the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. And unmanageability is only overcome by doing 4 through 9 and living in 10, 11, 12. It is then things start to change. It is then I can grow. It is then I you know, I don't want to sit at who wants to sit in any meeting being, with an obsession of the mind, telling him, blinding you, and then the unmanageability of restless, irritable discontent, and not being able to get past all these consequences you had. Oh, this is the best life gets. I heard people say step 1 is the only non-spiritual step. That's not true. It's probably the most spiritual step, because powerless pushes us to seek power. And people say, I'm going to do the spiritual part of they're all spiritual. I'm going to do the spiritual part of the program, they say, And then lastly, is step 1 is the only step we must do 100%. Now, people in the fellowship take that as like we're talking about 100% abstinence. And it used to be saying you hear quite a bit. And when people would say that, what they're talking about, we have 35 pages devoted to step 1, more than any other step. Bill wants us to be 100% convinced that we're powerless. He wants no lurking notion that one day you can drink normally. You just don't have any reservations there. It also, step 1 is the only step we really need to understand 100%. The rest of the steps we can start to understand the more we do them. That's why step 1 is the foundation, And here's the truth. Well, we have to take step 1. The truth is, step 1 took you a long time ago. Step 1 takes you. And so we're going to go to doctor's opinion, and we're going to go to XXV on the 4th edition. I don't know if we have another, I forget what it is in the 3rd edition, but I'm going to close down this part here. And, before we get to, many, describe the allergy obsession as a disease concept. I like to call it as an illness, because that's what Bill Wilson said it was. And he explained what he meant in 1960, why they avoided the term disease. Here's what he said. He said, we AAers have never called alcoholism a disease, because technically speaking, it's not a disease entirely. For example, there's no such thing as heart disease. Instead, there are many separate heart ailments or combinations of them. It is something like that with alcoholism. Therefore, we do not wish to get in the wrong with the medical profession by proclaiming alcoholism a disease entirely. Hence, we always called it an illness or malady, a far safer term to use. And that was Bill. I always found that interesting. So we're in doctor's opinion, XXV. And so it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's not us here, that's the first 100. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. I love that. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have experience with the suffering of our members and have witnessed our return to health. That's another word for that, would be recovered, right? A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital, that's Charles B. Towns, specializing in alcoholism and drug addiction. Ooh, don't say that around AA. The drug addiction, so it's for anyone, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. The doctor's opinion, I believe it's universal. I've helped many drug addicts by explaining this first step to them. I know some people sit there and shake their heads when I say that, but I've taken, first person I took to the steps, well, maybe it was the third person, was a heroin addict. And I went to my sponsor and I said, what do I do? And he goes, read it, just read it to him. And he's like, that's me, that's me. He got it. And I've never hesitated to take anyone through doctor's opinion. So I believe it's universal. I'm just going to put that out there. To whom it may concern, you can put your name there. I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. But at this time, it's 1937, so it was 38 years at that time when he was writing this. In late 1934, I attended a patient bill, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, which he's making decent money, was an alcoholic of the type I come to regard as hopeless. Hopeless is impossible to solve. That pine box we talked about. I mean, a hope is a condition of mind and body, nothing more than that. Hope is a condition of mind and body. In the course of his third treatment, some of us have to go to places, a few times, some more than a few times, rehabs. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas, in his case, spiritual, concerning a possible means of recovery. This is the underlining parts. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conception to other alcoholics, impressing upon them they must do likewise with others. This book has 103 musts in it. A must is a requirement, something that's important. It can't be missed or ignored. So it's a requirement, he's saying, to work with others. And why wouldn't I want to give away what's been freely given to me? Everything changed when I work with others. And even though I already had a spiritual awakening, but you truly don't understand the steps until you take someone through the steps. It's impossible. Fully understand the steps, because it runs deeper. It says this has become the basis of a rapidly, and that means fast growing fellowship of these men and women. These men and women and 100 others appear to have recovered. What's interesting is here's this doctor who never saw more than a 2% recovery rate saying these guys have recovered. I mean, that's a hell of an endorsement, And then he's saying something interesting also, that the basis of their rapidly growing fellowship is working with others, passing on the same spiritual ideas to another, to another, to another. That was the basis of their fellowship. Another word for basis is foundation. Is that the foundation of AA today? Is that the basis? Or is it group therapy? Is it talking, about our problems, or running from them, whatever you want to look at it? What is the foundation of your recovery? Is it meetings? I mean, how many fifth steps have you heard? How many of you led to a spiritual awakening? And helping others begins with you getting well, and more well as you take others through the steps. That's the beauty of it. There's a bold statement, by a doctor who worked with 40,000 alcoholics, and by saying 100 have recovered. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, do you think he was a little blown away? Like I said before, look what he says here. I personally know scores of cases where that type of whom others' methods has failed completely. He's never seen anything like this. These facts appear to be extreme medical importance because of extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch, that means new era, in the annals of alcoholism. These men have a remedy for thousands of situations. He's saying that they have a remedy, medicine, so to speak, a cure, therapy, whatever you want to call it. There's, several words you could say remedy for, but it's a big word for a doctor to use. That's what I'm saying. And Silkworth knew we were on something. He knew Bill was on something. And I think he knew that it was going to change the world and help millions. I just know he knew. And I'm just curious to know what went through his mind when he first talked to Bill and what Bill said. And he says he may rely absolutely on anything they have to say about themselves. It's a hell of an endorsement right there. You know, you may rely on anything you say about themselves. Some alcoholics. These people were looked at as liars, cheats, and thieves and criminals before. But now you can rely on everything they got to say about themselves. This comes from a doctor. Yet people, in the fellowship, when I speak of this book, they say, take what you want, leave the rest. It blows my mind. Blows my mind. This is very truly yours, William Duncan Silkworth, William D. Silkworth. So now we're on XXVI. The physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views and their statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms that we who have suffered alcoholic torture, some big words there, must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as the mind. So alcoholic and insane asylums were told, you're mentally insane because, they looked at alcoholism as only a problem of mental. What Silkworth discovered was the body was abnormal as well. A radical new concept, pretty deep. It did not satisfy us to be told that we cannot control our drinking just because we're maladjusted to life, that we're full fight from reality or outright mental defectives. Right there is the old diagnosis. That's the old diagnosis of alcohol. That's as far as they got with us. You're insane. You're maladjusted to life. You're full fight from reality. You're an outright mental defective. We're gonna, you're crazy. Put them in a rubber room. Put a straitjacket. Lock the door and throw you the key. That's how we got lost in the medical institution, the mental, the insane asylum institution, whatever you want to call it. That's how we got lost in there. They got tired of seeing us come in there over and over and over again. And they would just get lost. See, these things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we were sure that our bodies were sick as well. Being told I'm maladjusted to life, I saw therapists for years, off and on. My parents sent me to them as young as 8 years old. And I look back at those therapy sessions. This is the 70s. It was, one place was attack therapy, yelling at the kid, and then your kid doesn't handle emotions very well. Some guy's screaming at me, and he's, I by the time as I got older, I protected the fact that what they told me. I didn't want anyone to know I was maladjusted, life full from reality, or just defective, and being told I was dyslexic in school and this and that. And I kept those to myself, and I never mentioned them to anyone until I did my fifth step. How that went, and the person didn't even care. They cared, but they didn't care. It didn't bother them to be told that. But what got me was, with my alcoholism, it wasn't because I was trying to medicate myself. It was maybe I was in an extent, but the allergy of the body is why I'm alcoholic. It wasn't because of any of that other stuff. It was a relief to know that, but you got to remember the reasons, like these hospitals, like towns popped up treating alcoholic and drug addiction, is they didn't look at alcoholics anymore as mental patients. And that's a beautiful thing. They didn't want people anymore doped up and stuck in places. But that still happens even to this day. People locked up and stuck in places too long and doped up. And let's give the alcoholic a medication, or give a drug addict some medication, give them more drugs, In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. Why is it incomplete? Because the physical factor, the craving for more, once we start, is what makes you alcoholic. This doctor discovered what I believe is the missing link of why people are alcoholic. He discovered it. I wonder how long he kept it to himself. I always wondered that, thought about it. I wonder how long he kept it to himself because of, think if you're a doctor and all the doctors around you, think if you're a doctor that finds a cure for cancer. And all the doctors around you think, oh, no way. I read this doctor named Dr. Stanley Jacobs who came with this stuff called DSMO, which is known to cure cancer. And he said all the doctors around him, he kept it to himself because no one believed it. Now think of Silkworth with this allergy acceptance concept. Probably the same thing. I wonder how long he kept it to himself. He had to work a quiet, he had to find the right person to bring it to. Another drunk. I mean, now he wasn't the drunk, but to bring it to a drunk. So I don't know. The doctor's theory, though, why is it a theory for him? Because he's never experienced it, but he's worked with 40,000 of us, right? But once he gave it to one of us, boom, here's his theory. Oh, no, that's not a theory, dude. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinions seem as its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say, I love it, ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things which we cannot otherwise account. Amen. Yeah, alcoholics, relate to this concept of the body craving for more. It's what we couldn't put into words. I didn't know what an alcoholic was when I got to AA. I thought it was because I drank too much. And then someone turns around and tells me, hey, you have this physical allergy. Oh, that's me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's me. That's me. It's a beautiful thing. Though we work our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who's very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he's approached, as he then has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. The doctor writes, hold on. The doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. Paramount's the highest mountain in the peak of mountains. As I say this, after many years of experience as medical directors in the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction towns, there was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on the subject, which is covered in such mastery details in these pages. It's a great endorsement right there again. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology is the study and development of moral character development. We have realized that some form of moral psychology was urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difference beyond our conception, meaning they didn't know how to do it. With our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to anything, we perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good to lie outside of synthetic knowledge. I'm going to put this paragraph into layman's terms. I'm going to read it in a simpler language. This is what he's trying to say. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of spiritual experience was the utmost important to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. With our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we doctors are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of God that lie outside our human knowledge. That's what he's saying. He says many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in the hospital. While here, he acquired some ideas, which he put in the practical application at once. I explain to guys all the time, we're going to put this in the practical application at once in step 3. Boom. And then you put more in practical application by taking it to another person. Later, he required the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients. With some misgiving, we consented. Meaning at first he was like, I don't know, should I let him in here? Here's this guy who just had a spiritual experience in the hospital, phenomena experience, and wants to wander around telling other drunks about it. But he let him. Why? He saw something special in Bill. And anything was better than the 2% he saw recovery rates. It says the cases have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. Amazing is not a medical term. It's an endorsement, though. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and weary in the alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics, that's the real alcoholic allergy obsession, back from the gates of death. There's another endorsement. This guy, he's endorsing. He knew multiple that some of these guys have been in this hospital multiple times, not just Bill, but the guys who followed Bill, Parkhurst and these guys, all these other dudes. And all of a sudden he's seeing them and he's going, "That's you? Holy shit!" All of a sudden all these guys are he was blown away. His patients are getting well and walking again. You ever seen that movie Awakenings with Robert De Niro, where he the guy's shaking and he gives them, Robin Williams gives them all this medicine. They start walking around and talking. It's probably like that. Blown away. I mean, Silkworth, in a sense, felt he was a failure as a doctor. And now he sees this, alcoholics, coming back from death. Again, I would say he was a little blown away. It says, of course, alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for alcohol, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological members can benefit. This is detox. I recommend. Always, a guy calls me up and goes, "Hey, I'm drunk. What can you help me?" I said, "Yeah, you write a detox." Nothing I can do. We're gonna stop right there. I'm gonna stop the recording. Hopefully it doesn't shut us off. If it shuts everyone else off, come back.